Hi, this is Amanda from Timeout Scraps. I'm excited to be back on Holly Pixels with you. We're in Procreate and we're going to add a new canvas. We're going to make this canvas 5 inches tall by 7 inches wide and 300 DPI because we're going to make a Christmas card that we're going to print out. So we're going to make sure it's 300 DPI. You can print these Christmas cards at any place that you normally have your photos printed out. So check your photo printing places first online or at your local stores and see what size they print. And sometimes you can get envelopes to go with them too. And I'm going to use my new digital scrapbook kit called Rustic Christmas. And I'm just adding a background for now. Sometimes I like the busier pattern paper in the background, and then to add on top of that, I'm just centering this background paper with all the poinsettias and greeneries on it. And then I'm going to add a square on top of that first. So I'm going to select a square image, fill that in with a black, and then I'm going to clip a paper on top of it. It's easier to get that image rectangle set on top of my other image before adding a paper on top of it. It's a little cleaner this way. So I'm going to add a red paper on top. I just go stretch it out over my rectangle or my square. Go to my layers panel and I'm going to do a clipping mask, and it clips it right down to that. I can pinch those together into one layer then. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my drop shadows as I go. Fill that layer, add a Gaussian blur, and I just move it over to see how much of a blur I want to cause that drop shadow. Remember, these are flat pages right now, so they don't need too much of a drop shadow. I'm going to add one more paper on top of this. So I'm going to draw out a rectangle again. I have a hard time always getting it to the very edge, so it doesn't really matter since it's filled in with a plain color. I just go select and then stretch it out and center it exactly how I want it. I'm going to add a more plain paper on top of this one, and I'll clip it just like the past. Stretch it out, and then all I have to do is use a clipping mask. I'm going to go ahead and select that. Pinch those together, and we'll add a drop shadow to this layer as well. Gaussian blur. Increase the opacity. Now we're going to add a photo. I'm going to use a photo from Unsplash for this demonstration. To make sure everything's unselected before adding my photo in. I always forget that. Okay, resize and get it to about where I want it to be. And I want to add a frame on top of this photo. There's a couple frames that come in the kit, and I love this dark green one with a rope on top. It's very rustic. So I just get the frame to be on one side of the card, resize it to about right, and then I'll go in and adjust my photo so it lines up better. Select my photo and rotate that one a bit. Sometimes you'll have extra hanging outside of your frame, and you can just delete that, or select the frame and delete what's out, do an inverse and delete what's outside of it. I'm going to add my sentiment first before I put a lot of other embellishments on. I want to make sure that sentiment really shows because it is a Christmas greeting card. And this kit comes with several different sentiments you can use. And I'm going to add a drop shadow to my frame. Don't really need a drop shadow on the photo because the photo is in the frame. But I do need to make this drop shadow a bit chunkier because it's a big wood frame. So I'm going to bump up the opacity a bit more than the flat paper. And we'll add a bow on top for that rope. Looks like it's hanging on something that way. To make sure it's in the correct order, so I had to bring that up in my layers panel. Rotate that. And we'll go ahead and add a drop shadow for that bow. And I'm going to use the warp just to move the shadow over a bit to give it some more dimension. And I'll do the same for the frame. Just went back and used that warp. I didn't merge those layers together on that frame, so I was still able to edit that. Once I merge them together, I won't be able to edit them anymore. So it's kind of good to merge as you go a little at a time and not all of it at once or all of it right away. And I'm going to add a cluster of flowers in the corner. Start with a poinsettia. And I'm going to add some other flowers that have some really pretty glitter on them. And I learned a new trick from the comments last time on YouTube, that if you have something small, just have it selected and then go to the outside of the canvas and you can move it around with your pencil that way. It was such an awesome tip. So thank you to the person who mentioned that in the comments. We all learn something new every day. Move those flowers around. It's fun to play with clusters and getting all the layering and stack up just how you want it to make it look as realistic as possible. I'm going to add some greenery now. Use the same piece of greenery, so I'm only adding it once to Procreate, and then in the layers panel I'll just duplicate it and move it around to where I want each one to be. So much easier. When I'm building a cluster, I really do not like to merge any of the layers until I'm completely done with it, because there's so many little adjustments I like to make along the way. I'll do one more piece of greenery. And then we have to have a pine cone. Oh, I love that trick. It saved me so much time with my clusters. Okay, I like it, so it feels like it's almost finished. Just need a little something more. So I'm gonna go under the frame. I'm gonna add this star snowflake type element and kind of build that out as a bit of a small scatter. So again, I'm just adding one of the star snowflake items, and then I'll duplicate it in the layers panel. When I add something like a star where it has a definite look or pattern to it, I like to rotate each one so it looks just a little different, like it's not the same exact one. And I change the size up too. So I added 3 to the top, and I'm going to add 2 to the bottom. And I think in design, odd numbers do look nice. So 3 and 2 is 5. And in the cluster for the flowers, I added 3 flowers. Okay. Get everything exactly where I want it. Checking to see if I need anything else. I could have also added a year, and I did not do that. Now I'm just grouping my elements so I can add drop shadows. And so I grouped all the stars. That way I can add a drop shadow once for all of them. And that works pretty well, especially if things aren't right on top of each other. Saves so much time. The stars are a little bit flat, so I don't have a lot of drop shadow on those. But when I go to my flowers, those are going to be more dimensional, so I'm going to add more of a drop shadow to those. First, I'm going to add a drop shadow to the sentiment. It's very flat, so it'll have a very, very small amount of drop shadow on it. Very low opacity. I'm going to really zoom in so I can see what it looks like. Adding a little just brings it to life, though. I'm going to group the greenery together first, and I'll add a drop shadow to that. That way I don't have to do it to each piece. It's a little more 3D, so it'll have a little bit more of a drop shadow. I'm going to use the warp tool too. Just move it over a little bit to add that dimension. And the pine cones and the flowers I'm going to each do separately. I'm not going to combine them because they are kind of layered on top of each other. So I want to keep those shadows separate. Looks a little more realistic. I'm going to use the warp tool. We'll do the same to all the flowers. Getting close to done. One more flower. I love that you can send a Christmas card that you've made, you've created, has your pictures of your family on it, and you've only had to make one, and you can get multiple printed. So much easier. And there is the finished Christmas card. There's so many different types of Christmas cards you can create, and I hope you've found some inspiration from this tutorial. Have a great day.